All right, so we are recording. We're here today to talk about preparing for Spring 22 release. So let's get into it. Of course, because this is a release-related conversation, where would we be if we didn't start with the safe harbor? You've all seen this a million times before, but because we're going to talk about pilots and betas today, lots of forward-looking statements, please bear this in mind, any decisions you make or any advice you give to customers. Today's agenda, we'll do some brief introductions. We're going to jump into release readiness, a few things related to the release that are not the features themselves necessarily, key dates and resources. And then we'll go into the release notes, what we call a first look. And this gives us an opportunity to pay attention to some of the things that I think everybody should know about, from an admin side of house, declarative changes that are going to affect us all, and give us a chance to talk about them, look at them. And then to wrap up, we'll try to keep this as close to 1 hour as possible. And at the end of the hour, I have a little kind of quiz prepared for anybody that finds that fun. We've done that before, just to test some of your knowledge that you gained from today's session. So we're very lucky on the call today to have Jacinta Burke join us, who's the Director for Product Readiness at Salesforce. Jacinta, I'll let you just introduce yourself quickly to the group.
Hi, everyone. I'm based here in Dublin, but I'm the global program owner for release readiness at Salesforce. And I own the Trailblazer community group called Release Readiness Trailblazers, where hopefully you'll go and post your questions about the release overview deck, which is a deck for admins to present to stakeholders, and also Release Readiness Live, which is our series of live webcasts that we do with the product managers around the release. And I happen to be based in Dublin. As a customer, I was a member of this user group, so I always try and join when I can.
Yeah, thanks for that. And we really appreciate it. No rest for the wicked. So while we were all enjoying our time away, Jacinta was busy at work preparing for this release over the holidays. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Jürgen Strackmann. I'm the community group leader here in Dublin. I'm also a certified Salesforce instructor and a PM for a consultancy called Blue Wave that's located in Ireland and in the UK. So while we're on the subject of the Release Readiness Trailblazers group, I certainly like to make mention of this group from time to time because I think it's the go-to group for resources. And you'd mentioned this, Jacinta. Is there anything that you want to add about this wonderful group?
Yeah, so I think this is the group that we use to push out all the content around the release. So if you're looking for any asset that's produced by Salesforce around the release, this is the group to go to. We also have lots of MVPs who will put their blog posts about the release on this group. So it's really your central place to find any information about the release. It's also your place to ask questions. So if you have a question about a piece of functionality, often there'll be another customer who'll be able to answer it. But if not, I will loop in the appropriate product manager. Sometimes I might even know the answer myself. But really, it's somewhere. It's my first stop every day in work, and kind of I go in there, I answer questions, I point people to different content. I push out my content and the admin team's content and anybody else at Salesforce who's producing release content. We put it all there. So that's where you'll find everything.
Yeah, fantastic. And that's always where I'm sourcing material for my reviews. So it's really an essential group.
Oh, and the one thing that I would say is, if you are finding something in the release that particularly Jurgen's going to cover release updates. Kind of this group has been a great way of giving feedback to product managers. And one example is the disable ref ID email threading update for Service Cloud. I got a lot of feedback on this group about that release update and how disruptive it would be for customers and that the timeline wasn't long enough. And I brought that back to product management, and they've postponed it once already, and they're probably going to postpone it again. So, we do take your feedback seriously, and anything you put on there, we do bring back to the product managers.
Really good to know. It's great to have that direct line. So one of the things you can find in the Release Readiness Trailblazers group, quite a few weeks before the release itself, is the key dates, which is a blog that Jacinta you always write and publish. So I'll leave it with you if that's all right to go through the key dates and make everyone aware.
So early on in the release, so kind of for the next release, for summer, it'll be at the start of April. For spring, it was at the start of December. So about 12 weeks before the release, we push out this key dates blog, and we have an infographic that we put out as well with all the dates you need to know about. So as you can see right now, we're just past sandbox preview. The release overview deck and the feature matrix were published into the group this week as well. The feature matrix is a very low-tech Excel spreadsheet that people love kind of for working through what the features are and kind of what they're going to put on their backlog. It's worth checking out if you haven't seen it before. It's a good prep tool. And then we're into the different release weekends. Now, this weekend, we here at Salesforce are going to get the release. The release will hit most people over here in Europe, either on the 4th or the 11th of February. And then also on here, you've got our Release Readiness Live webcasts. They start on February 4th with the admin and developer picks of the release. And then we've a full week of the various cloud sessions the following week with all our product managers. And if any of you have financial services cloud or health cloud, got new shows for those two this time.
Yeah, I always keep my eyes out for the dates for the Release Readiness Live week, because I find that business users often really get a lot of value out of that, and there's always sessions you can direct their way. So February 4th for Release Live. Thank you very much for that. I've also put the what I call the release kit on here, but I think is actually called Release in a Box. Admin.salesforce.com/release in a box, and this gives you a kind of marketing branded deck, a little bit different than the release overview deck, for you to be able to pick and choose those features or products that apply specifically to you or your customers, and already have a deck that you can take and upskill them in what's coming in spring 22. So really helpful pre-built decks make your life easier as an admin.
And what's really good about the release in a box as well is that embedded into that deck, it's got little 2-3 minute videos, which are demos of the feature. And that's really useful if you just want to sit down and get a quick overview of the feature.
Definitely. Fantastic. Okay, so here's the first look, right? So every time we try to compile the whatever it was, 700 or 800 pages of the release notes into a 1-hour overview, we pick things that number one are primarily declarative for an admin audience, and then number two, pretty far reaching, so would have the most impact, the most number of users. So we tend to focus on core clouds, core functionality, and platform updates. With that in mind, today we're going to be looking at Salesforce Overall, analytics, customization, development, Einstein Automate, mobile, and just a few of the release updates that I think that everybody should be aware of. Let me get my speaker notes up here. I have a couple of things as we go along that I just want to make sure to remember to mention. Okay, so as we work through the Spring 22 release, at times I might mention something as being in pilot or beta. So for those of you who aren't aware of the release cycle that Salesforce goes through, before something is GA, there's not a lot promised around support. So you just want to be careful when you actually train users or implement something. And generally speaking, I would wait until it's GA, but that doesn't mean you can't be working with it and providing feedback to Salesforce when it's in beta or pilot. Another big difference, I think, between beta and pilot is that pilot often is opt-in, so it's not there for you automatically in a sandbox, but you might have to engage with someone from support to be added to the pilot. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so let's dive into the release notes, and we're going to start with Salesforce Overall. This is the only thing I've pulled out of general enhancements that everyone should hopefully already be aware of. This is the third time we're bringing this up in this group, and this is your final warning to get ready for multi-factor authentication. So that multi-factor authentication requirement is coming February 1st, 2022. What that states is that Salesforce will then require all customers to use MFA in order to access Salesforce products through the user interface. So that is users who are logging in through the UI, both in production and in sandboxes. So there's just a ton of resources out there for you. If this is something that you're still working on, or if you have questions, there's community groups available to you. There is something special. I'm not sure how many people are aware of this, but Jacinta's brought this to our group's attention this week, though. We have an MFA webinar on January 20th. So if you do have any last lingering questions, either because you've recently implemented MFA or you're still in the process of implementing MFA before the deadline, you can go and register at this link for the enablement webinar. Ask your questions. That's January 20th. That's a Thursday, 9 a.m. GMT. And Jess, is there anything else that you want to add about that event?
No, I have to be honest and say I know absolutely nothing about MFA.
Okay. Well, it is great to have a few of these webinars for folks who maybe are still working through some last minute questions. So it's a great final opportunity. Now, from the release notes, there are a few new updates in Spring 22 that relate to MFA. These are in the Security, Identity, and Privacy section of the release notes under Identity and Access Management. And the first one relates to built-in authenticators. So if you were in the process of implementing MFA, or you already have, you should know that now those built-in authenticators like Touch ID on your phone or Face ID in Apple or Windows Hello are all considered viable verification methods. So it just continues to expand the options we have to provide to our users to make it easy for them to meet our authentication requirements while still using technologies that they have available to them or that they prefer and use on a regular basis. In addition to that, I think because folks were asking this question quite a bit, I saw last year in the MFA group, in the release notes, we see admins through high assurance sessions, that is admins going through MFA themselves. They actually bypass the MFA requirement when they go through that login as process. What the heck am I talking about? Well, as an admin, when you're troubleshooting on behalf of a user, once you're already logged into the system, you might log in as that user to see Salesforce through their eyes and help understand what their visibility issue might be or whatever that business process question is that they have. You will not be prompted to go through MFA again. And that setting is kind of set up that way by default. However, if for some reason you do require, a customer does require to have that authentication method be stronger so that an admin is forced through MFA again on the login as process, you can do that. You can enable it. You just have to contact customer support. Okay. It's disabled by default just to make our lives a bit easier as admins. All right, next place we're going to stop on our little tour is still in Salesforce Overall, but moving on to a section for the Your Account app. The Your Account app is GA, and we're officially retiring Checkout. So you might or might not be familiar with Checkout as a consultant, some of you, but this is where our customers are going to dialogue about their contracts, to change licenses, to do renewals. All of this is done with their AE. However, with the account app, there's so much that they can now do on their own. So it should really make those individuals, on your customer side or that you're working with, the folks who work in billing and the account managers, very happy because it provides them this new self-service solution for managing all things Salesforce subscription related. In addition to that, in my experience, there might be someone who deals with billing, but otherwise doesn't really use Salesforce very often. And until now, or very recently, I should say, they would have been on a Salesforce enterprise license and as an admin, logging in primarily just to use checkout or to answer questions. Now you can actually give them an identity license and assign them to the Your Account app permission set, so that they're not using a full Salesforce license only to log in to review information like your contracts, products, and licenses, and so on. Okay, so that's pretty handy. You have up to 100 free identity licenses that come with an org as well. So the Your Account app admin user permission set is already in the org, but it would need to be assigned. Admins and other Salesforce users who have that manage billing permission, which is the legacy permission, they already have access to the Your Account app. You don't need to add them to that permission set. So there are two ways to access this new fancy app, either from the navigation menu on the left or directly from setup on the right. So if you click on your setup gear here, you'll see that appear. When you click on your account, this is what the app looks like. It's very handy because you can do so much from just a few screens. It helps you save time in reviewing contracts, requesting changes, and confirming automatic renewals. You can even sort this in like a list view to see when certain automatic renewals are due. Yeah. A small but mighty change, I think, and that's why I listed it here. Okay, so moving on in the release notes to analytics, we're going to look at two things under the reports and dashboards section. The first is something called the find the right report type for new reports, which is beta. And then the next one we'll talk about is editing multiple fields. So this first beta program is an enhanced way of looking at report type selector in the UI. So if you were to go to your report builder to build a report, you know, when you click new, first you have to choose a report type to base that report on. Now what we see in that report type selector is a lot more information to help us choose the right report type, including recently used report types. We can view fields and objects and some other static values like who created the report type and when. So you can see some of this on screen here. I've stolen this directly from the release notes. We have our recently used report types up at the top here. Now, one thing I found, I just mentioned, one thing I found a little bit funky about this one is I tend to log into the GS0 orgs, that is the orgs that became available in December, and look at a few of these features for myself, and sometimes just take screenshots of my own that are a little bit more exacting to what I'm looking at. This particular beta doesn't seem to be available in the report and dashboard user interface settings where the release notes indicate that it should be. So this is something that either needs to be turned on through a support case, I'm guessing, or that may change in the coming weeks. You know, we're only in the first week of the preview. I think the preview began midnight Saturday, thereabouts. So we're still only in the first week of the preview. So it might change, but I couldn't actually demo this one because I couldn't turn it on. The next one is something I think that will make everybody happy. Still a beta program, but the third time we're talking about this in our group. This beta is to allow us to edit multiple fields on the report run page, to be able to actually make changes in various rows and columns on a report as a business user. And as of this release, we can do that. It's just a reminder, though, in order to turn this beta on, you need to go into the setup menu, and under report and dashboard settings, you have this enable inline editing in reports, Lightning Experience only beta. Once you tick that and save, here's an example in my GS0 org. I'm able to run a report, modify the values of multiple rows and multiple columns simultaneously. So what I did was I just took these two opportunities, I changed their stage, and I updated their close dates. And when I press save, it commits all the values together. So this beta is definitely one to watch for. When this does go GA, I think it's going to be a very big deal for end users, for folks who are using reports. All right, moving on to customization section of the release notes, specifically Lightning App Builder. I'm only going to highlight one thing in our brief session today that I thought was compelling, and that is without doing anything as an admin, we now have a new tool in our tool belt to monitor pages, that is desktop record pages that might be underperforming. What we're talking about here is poor performing Lightning pages as identified in the Lightning usage app. So there's a table here called performance that lists out our Lightning pages. And I learned a new acronym from Salesforce in this release, which is EPT, or Experience Page Time. The page time load, if it's 4 or more seconds, indicates that the page is performing quite slowly. And it gives you an opportunity to go into that page and investigate it and optimize it. Maybe you have something in that page that could be optimized, whether it's a flow or complex related lists with logic, dynamic forms, whatever that is, gives you an opportunity to change that page and improve the performance of that page. Okay. Now you can get to this new performance table in your previous sandboxes, your GS0 orgs, two ways. You can either go directly to the Lightning usage app or from the Lightning app builder. When you're actually looking at a page, you'll be able to see its individual page performance there. Okay, now I know that this is an admin group, so I don't tend to talk about too much in development, but this one is so important, I thought it would be remiss of us not to talk about it, and that is API retirement. So in the coming release, that is summer 22, versions 7 through 20 of the SOAP, REST, and Bulk APIs will be retired. Salesforce announced this a year ago, but we have a few months left, and so for anyone who engages with a new customer and needs to, you might want to check on this quite quickly in the beginning of your assessment of that org. I'm just going to put up on screen here API and end of life retirement announcements for version 7 through 20 is enforced in summer 22. So that is the next release, meaning we have Q1 and Q2 of this year for any orgs you're working in to review all of your code base, your custom code base, to make sure that none of your SOAP, REST, or Bulk APIs are still working off of version 7 through 20. The reason that that's so important is when those APIs are retired, the applications will experience disruption. So specifically, they will fail because that call will result in an error to the requested endpoint. That endpoint will no longer be found, right? So we want to avoid, of course, any disruption to ongoing application processes by identifying those old API versions and updating them now if you haven't done so already. And while we're at it, you should know that versions 21 through 30 of these three APIs will also be retired, but you have until next summer, so you have a year. Great to prepare for that early, do it in small pieces so that you can test it and so on, but you should be aware of that planned retirement schedule. I've assigned you a little homework icon there as well. All right, so now let's move on to Einstein Automate. I'm going to be specifically focusing on Flow. There were absolutely a ton of enhancements to Flow in this release. I've pulled out only a few of the really compelling ones. I did not have time to cover everything. So in Flow Builder itself, there are two things I want to bring to your attention. The first is the novel ability for us to visualize flows by object and the DML, the operation or triggering event, in a tool called Flow Trigger Explorer. And the other is the ability to control the order of our flows. So let's look at Flow Trigger Explorer first. You can access the Flow Trigger Explorer through two mechanisms. The first is if from setup, you go to flows. Welcome. I see there's still a few folks joining us there, so welcome. We're just talking about Flow Trigger Explorer. There are two ways to access Flow Trigger Explorer. If you go to setup and you're looking at the list view for all your flows, you'll see a new button in the upper right-hand corner, Flow Trigger Explorer. List views are fine, but they're not always the best way to visualize our flows. It's not clear which flows pertain to which object or which context without creating different list views. So creating a list view by object or even by context. And that can get cumbersome, to say the least. I think you could use naming conventions as well, which is something I've done in the past. But Salesforce has stepped in to really help us solve this problem here. So now you can click on this button, Flow Trigger Explorer, or from a specific flow, you'll see Open Flow Trigger Explorer for that particular flow. So those are the two ways you can get there. And what you see when you get to Flow Trigger Explorer is you have the option to choose an object, that's step one, and then the DML, that's step two, or trigger is what they call it. That is the created, updated, or deleted context. And then you can see a list of all of the before save and after save and asynchronous flows on that object. Very, very helpful way to visualize your active automation, and certainly going to be even more important moving forward with the deprecation long-term of workflow rules and process builders. I came across the video, which was only published a few days ago, I think maybe 5 or so days ago. I've linked that into our deck as well. This is on the Salesforce YouTube channel, Use Flow Trigger Explorer in Salesforce. That's gosh, maybe a 4 or 5 minute video in total, and it gives you a great example of the Trigger Explorer. I don't have a ton of flows in my GS0 org, so I couldn't be as detailed as they could be, but I've included the link to the video here for you. Now, I have one note, so I'll go back to that slide in a moment, but it dovetails with this second enhancement, which I think is in some ways more important, and that is that we can actually control the order, the runtime order of our flows now. So we have an attribute in our flow properties called trigger order, and we can put a numerical value here. And so if you have two before save flows on the same object, like a count, and you order them 1 and 2, the first flow will be evaluated. The one with the numerical value 1 will be evaluated before 2. That is brand new in terms of our ability to control how automation fires in Salesforce. We didn't have anything like that for flows, processes, or workflow rules before. So that's really a big deal. The one caveat to this so far, although I'm not sure how long it'll be that way, is that in Flow Trigger Explorer, the way the flows are visualized right now is alphabetical, not based on the control order, the trigger order, which seems a little counterintuitive. And I think that Salesforce will be changing that soon. So until they do, just be aware of that. Okay, I want to mention a few flow runtime enhancements as well. The first being that they're retiring an older form of flow screen properties, which is called 2-column layouts. They've also changed the way they measure flow CPU time in your logs. And they've introduced a new pilot, very similar to dynamic forms for layouts, but for flow. So some very interesting updates for flow runtime. The first is 2-column flow layouts. Now, you have time here. While this is in the Spring 22 release notes, it's not going to be enforced until Summer 22, although Salesforce encourage you not to wait to begin evaluating any of your existing screen flows. So that is in Q1 and Q2 to take a few moments to look at the active screen flows you have in an org and determine if you're using what they call 2-column flow layouts. And there's 2 ways you can do that. If you include the flow layout attribute equals 2-column in your flow URL, and you're passing that to a web tab, to a custom button, or to a custom link. So those are 3 component types you might want to check. Or if you have the layout property, so you've actually gone in and set that property in the flow builder to 2 columns when you added the flow to a Lightning page. And that might be surfaced either on a Lightning page or in an experience builder site if you're using, I keep wanting to say communities. So those are the ways in which you might use a 2-column flow layout. The reason this is being deprecated is because there's a much more robust component type taking its place. That new component type is called section components. And at present, they can go up to 4 columns, I believe, and probably will go even farther in the future. So it's a more robust modern Lightning Web Component, standard Lightning Web Component that we can use in flows, and it's going to be replacing those old 2-column layouts. So again, I've assigned you a little homework there. If you are using any screen flows in your org, make sure to put this on your radar, put it in the demand pipeline so that you take a look at it before summer. Next one is CPU time and the way that that's measured. This is quite an interesting one. So Salesforce have updated and really resolved an issue that existed in the way they were measuring CPU time consumed by flows and processes. Again, while this is mentioned in the Spring 22 notes, it won't be enforced until summer, so you have some time. But there's also some work to do, so it's not too early to get started. The best way to do that, to evaluate whether or not this has any impact on your org at all, is to go into the release update section in setup. And if you've been there before, you'll see you have the things that are coming up or overdue, and you can go through the individual release updates and read about them. There might be something to enable. In this case, there is something to enable. So if we want to accurately measure the CPU time for flows and processes, then we come in here and click this button, Enable Test Run in our sandboxes. And then you just want to run your flows, and make sure that your flows successfully complete. If you have flows handling bulk record transactions. You might want to do a performance test on those flows. What was happening previously is that CPU time was occasionally misattributed to other automation that was occurring later in the transaction. So where it was actually the flow itself or the process potentially that was not optimized, it appeared as if it was some other component type. So Salesforce have resolved this. That's what this release update is all about. My hunch here is that almost no one is probably going to find a flow issue as a result of this update, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't run your tests. Okay. And hopefully, long term, it means that it makes it easier for us to identify when flows aren't optimized in the future, because that CPU runtime will be calculated more accurately. So the last one in flow runtime that's really interesting is a pilot, meaning that in order to work with this, you're going to have to go to the Flow React Screens pilot group in this Trailblazer community, request to join this pilot. This is pretty exciting, though. It seems pretty familiar to dynamic forms. The example they have here is in a flow, rather than two screens where someone provides an input and then on the next screen you're able to react to that input, you can actually have a component react to the input on the same screen. So if you have a standard component here, like a search, and then a custom component like a Lightning data table, you can take the input from that search and render a Lightning data table on the same screen. Overall, the hope here would be that you reduce the total number of screens that users have to navigate through across all of your flows everywhere, right? Because what you previously did in two screens, you could now achieve in one. So to find this group is really straightforward. If you go to the Trailblazer community under, you search all groups, not featured groups, but all groups, and you just search in the keyword reactive. Okay. So that's a pretty cool one. That'll be nice to see that come into beta so that we can all play around with it. So last one in flow, this is a lot of flow. Last one in flow is converting workflow rules to flows with a migration tool. And this is also in beta. So as many of you probably already know, there was an announcement at Dreamforce that the plan is to deprecate long-term, to retire both workflow rules and process builder. And the reasons and justification for that are primarily simple, that there's overlapping functionality across workflow rules, process builder, and flow. It's a lot to manage and a lot to learn, both for Salesforce and their customers. The decisions for this and what to do about it, I think, is really, really well articulated in a recent article by Jennifer Lee called What's Happening with Workflow Rules and Process Builder, which was published back in October off the back of Dreamforce. There is no set timeline yet. So at the moment, Salesforce don't have an official timeline for all the phases of this retirement. However, you can expect that the new button for a new workflow rule or a new process builder will probably disappear by the end of this year, by the end of 2022. If I were you, I would already stop creating them, because essentially you're creating technical debt. We know they're on their way out the door. So I highly encourage everybody to stop creating workflow rules and process builders and instead embrace flow. Now, on that note, Salesforce is also trying to help us with this enormous number of currently working workflow rules and processes, and how do we long-term begin transitioning this to flow? And this is the first step in that direction. So if you have workflow rules that meet the criteria, meaning there are certain elements in workflow rules that are already supported in actions and so on, you can use this beta tool, and it will kind of magically convert it to a flow for you. Once it converts it to a flow, you can, in a sandbox, deactivate your workflow rule, then activate the flow and test it. And if you're happy that the flow meets the requirements of the previous workflow rule, you can take that flow to production and deprecate the workflow rule, and your work is done for you. So that's how Salesforce imagine you using this tool. I would suspect that in the near future, this migration tool will be expanded to process builders as well. Okay. All right, so moving on to Salesforce mobile app, there was definitely some movement in the mobile app section of the release notes. So We're going to talk about tablet, and we're going to talk about the retirement of some legacy tablet experiences, and we're going to talk about an additional improvement to mobile home. So first, full width Lightning experience for tablet has gone GA. This is the new modern tablet experience that is both for iOS and Android tablets. This is what Salesforce wants all tablet users using moving forward. Having said that, we need admins' help to do that. So I thought I had it pictured here, but you need to go into the setup menu and actually choose to use the new tablet experience on behalf of your users. Once you do that, they'll be able to take advantage of the new full width experience on Lightning on tablet, which means that someone rotates their tablet, they see it in landscape, and if they rotate it back, they see it in portrait. Certainly something I know users have been asking for quite some time. Once we start designing with that in mind, that people can take their devices and rotate them, and when they rotate them to a different aspect ratio, we want to take advantage of that. When we're building our pages in Lightning App Builder, we can actually review, we can preview what those layouts are going to look like. So as a part of the rollout of the Lightning tablet experience, we have the tablet portrait and tablet landscape options in our device previews. So that's pretty cool. Makes sense that those would come out together. Here we go. I knew that was in there somewhere. So there is a planned retirement of the existing experiences. So previously there was a Salesforce One experience for tablet. There was also an initial Lightning on tablet that was only single column. It didn't support changing aspect ratio. Both of those are planned for retirement in spring 23. So 1 year from today. But that's not too far away. So I think it's a good idea for folks who can justify it to go ahead and enable the Lightning on tablet, this one which is recommended in the setup menu. Once you turn it on, test it in the sandbox, and when you're happy with it, you can turn it on in production and you're done. And that covers off two sections in the release notes, the introduction of the new tablet experience and also the retirement of the two previous ones. Okay. Something else to be aware of in Salesforce Mobile is mobile home. So we've spoke about mobile home in this group a few times before. Mobile home, I think, first went GA on iOS last summer and then GA for Android in fall. And what it really boils down to, I keep losing my speaker notes, but what it really boils down to is a kind of configuration that allows users to personalize what they see in their mobile experience. So as an admin, when we put the mobile home in the selected items for the navigation menu, then users can do things like put their calendar in their home or pin reports or favorite items that they use often. And my mobile home might look different from your mobile home. It allows users to dynamically choose from various standard components and then manage those components on their own, all taking away from what would have previously had to been admin requests. Now, mobile home is supported on version 234 and later of the Salesforce mobile app. Okay, so with that little bit of background on what the mobile home is, what's come out in spring 22 specifically is what's called pinned list. This is a new card that they've added to mobile home that allows users to take their pinned lists. You know, when you're looking at list views on various objects and you use a particular custom list view that you've created and you pin it so that you don't have to go looking for it. Well, if you've taken the time to pin it in desktop, sure be great if it was already there for you in mobile as well. And that's what we get with pinned lists. So once you change your mobile home to add the pin list card, then you can see all of those pin lists across records and objects on your mobile device. Okay, kind of a no-brainer when you hear about it, very intuitive, immediately helpful to end users. I think the only thing to be said here from an admin perspective to get up and running with this is simply to inform end users that it exists. You might play around with it a little bit yourself in a sandbox so that you can issue some training to your users, but it's pretty intuitive. And there's not much you need to do as an admin to enable this, because your users can simply, after it goes GA in February, begin adding it to their mobile devices at will. Okay, so Last thing I wanted to touch on in the release notes is release updates. So these are the kind of long running, pesky little critical updates that don't necessarily coincide with the release schedule itself, or sometimes just something that we get upfront knowledge about a year or more in advance. The one that is enforced in this release, I'm just reminding folks about, is called the login credentials as URL query string parameters, and it's being disabled. So this was never a kind of a great or a preferred way, I think, to authenticate into an environment. But you should be aware that in order to improve security, Salesforce is now removing the ability for users to log into orgs, that is production or sandbox environments, or experience cloud sites by putting usernames and passwords as query string parameters into the login URL. So after Spring 22 goes GA or in your sandboxes now, if for any reason you were using these query string parameters, you'll notice that users, whatever they are, test users, integration, or end users, are redirected to a login page or get a redirect status code. Okay, so I would guess of everyone on the call, there are very few people who are using these parameters, but you still want to probably take this back to your team and evaluate, or at least be aware of it. If during the course of regression this month it comes up that one of your users is being redirected, maybe it's because they were using query string parameters and created a desktop shortcut or a browser shortcut or something. Okay.
Yeah, we tend to find this is something that hits product managers and solution engineers more, who have multiple demo orgs, so they have all query strings set up that they could just share them and share their demos.
Yep. Yep, very helpful to know that. So a few more release updates. Again, this is just me making sure people are aware. These aren't going to hit until summer, but time is running out. We've spoken about these before, but I know for folks who use Sales Cloud, you're probably very aware of this. Salesforce has recently changed the way folks access the product table by introducing org-wide defaults to products. So this is just a reminder for any of you who work with Sales Cloud instances that you need to have those OWDs for products set up ahead of summer 22 in order for folks not to lose access or for business processes to be affected. And in addition to sharing rules for your internal users, you also need to remember sharing rules to retain and control access for guest users. So that is anyone who needs access to products that will go through a new form of sharing through OWDs, and that is going to be enforced in summer 22. Two more updates. Both of these we've talked about in previous sessions, and I believe both of these have been pushed back slightly. One is the reminder to enable enhanced domains. So after you have a My Domain, to enable enhanced domains, if it isn't already on, for a lot of you, I'm guessing it probably is on. But if you go into setup to the My Domain page and you look, you'll know if you have enhanced domain turned on or not. That is going to be required in winter 23, so the end of this year. And then Salesforce is moving to a new ICU locale format. That is how numbers and dates and names and things might be represented. They're moving to a more standard format. It's a part of a wider approach to standardize Salesforce. And they're going to be pushing that update in spring 23, so a year from now. I'm not going to go too deep into that update either. We've done a more in-depth analysis when they first announced it in a previous group, and that information is all available to you in our group. And also, if you just go to the release notes, it's really easy. You can run a SOQL query in Dev Console, which straight away will tell you who is using what locales and whether you're impacted by this update at all. You may not be. And if you are impacted, it lets you know which users are on the impacted locales, and it informs what your testing plan might look like, what locales you want to test, and whether or not those changes to the locales actually mean anything for you. Because even if they're on a locale that's going to be changed, that mightn't necessarily mean there's any negative impact. Okay. All right. Well, we have 10 minutes left on the hour, and we still have some things to do, including a fun quiz. But I wanted to pause here after that little whirlwind through the release notes and ask if anyone had any questions, or if anyone had anything that they wanted to add, some feature that they were reading about that I didn't mention, or something that they're really excited about that impacts them or their customers, now's your opportunity. And also, we have Jess on the call, so it's your opportunity to ask her some questions as well. Can app performance be turned off? It shows up every time we edit any Lightning page. Louison, are you talking about the in-app guidance prompt?
Yeah, the little chart with the gauge that.
Yep. So my brain's a little messed up after going through the release notes so quickly over break. So I don't know if it was actually Spring 22 or not, but I know I read somewhere in in-app guidance, I think it actually was this release, that Salesforce is now externalizing, because they have all their own prompts as well, right? MFA is another great example. They use in-app guidance to notify Salesforce customers of changes as well. And they now externalize all of the standard prompts so that you as an admin can choose to enable or disable them. So I would guess that if you can disable that performance prompt, it would be in that new table. Let me make a note of that, because I think after the fact, I can put that into the group.
In any case, in the current release, the one we're running at the moment in winter, is not available, right? It cannot be turned off. You have to click on the X every single time. Am I right?
I believe so. Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, I think that only in Spring 22 are they now externalizing those standard in-app guidance and allowing admins to turn off the Salesforce notifications, not your own custom notifications, but actually the Salesforce notifications. But I'll publish that in the group after the call.
Okay. Now, I have another question, but since there's somebody else trying to ask, I'll wait until the end. All right.
Do we have other questions? Does someone have another question?
William A. has raised his hand.
Oh, thanks for that. Yeah, William, please go ahead, take yourself off mute.
Yeah, so nice to see you again. We saw us last time on the event with Florian Baltes, if you remember. I just wanted to ask you to the point you said, because of the login as another user and the point of MFA, I understood you that this function bypasses MFA, right?
So, correct. So my reading of this security and identity update is that if you are logged in as a Salesforce admin through MFA, so you're in a high assurance session to get into Salesforce, if you log in as another user while logged in a high assurance session, it's not going to prompt you for MFA a second time. And that's specifically because Salesforce understands that login as feature and troubleshooting for end users is so important that they had it off by default. But my interpretation of the release notes is that you can have that activated if you prefer by contacting Salesforce support. Okay, so by activating it, I can force MFA again. Okay. Yes. Great, because I got one case where I mean, me as an admin, I use also the feature when Salesforce support needs to log in, for example, as me. And I have MFA enabled and also forced to use it. And then came the case that Salesforce support was asking me if I can provide a temporary verification code for them because they had no access. Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, I would have guessed that when Salesforce logs in as us as a part of the support function, that would actually follow a different protocol. That's interesting. I wonder if that will stay that way, to be honest. But it's very helpful to know that. Yeah, I didn't know that's how that worked. So that's why I was wondering. But good to know. Good to know that there's this possibility. Thank you. Yeah. Do we have some other questions? Is there anything anyone is really excited about that I didn't have time to mention? Because certainly this was highlights in the best sense. There's a ton of things I just didn't have time for. Well, for sake of time, I want to try something.
Before you get into the, sorry, Jürgen, just before you get into the quiz, a quick question. This might not be the right forum, so you can give me offline if you want to. But one thing I find really, really frustrating, and I can't understand why it's happening, is when I create a new object, a custom object, the chatter components are not available. And I have not been able to find in the help, in the documentation, how do I enable chatter for custom objects? However, if I create a new object using a spreadsheet, something that was introduced, I think, 2 releases ago, Salesforce automatically creates the new custom object and all the elements to it, the like page layouts, the lightning pages, and then it incorporates chatter for that custom object. But if I go through the process of creating a new object the normal way, not using a spreadsheet, I can't add chatter components, elements. Sorry, maybe this is too specific. Maybe you want to take this offline, but in case anyone has a clue, how do I enable chatter for custom objects?
Yeah, we'll have to. So towards the end of the call, I should be able to help you with that because it's while it's not in the object settings, it's a different place in setup. It should be really straightforward. So it should only take us a few minutes for me to show you that.
Thank you so much.
I didn't know there was a difference in behavior when you insert an object from a spreadsheet, but I tell you, since the Trailhead module, I haven't actually had an opportunity in real life to create an object from a spreadsheet. So it's good to know.
Yeah, it's funny. It's really bizarre, and the fact that the documentation doesn't help. I see Dara Kinney has left me a link. I'll have a look at that link. Appreciate that.
Yep.
But yeah,
Yep.
bizarre. Thank you.
Yep. People in the group are already helping you as well. You can see, yeah, they're pointing you to feed settings. Okay. All right. Well, look, so the last thing really is to just give this a try. It's only 6 questions, right? So it's not exhaustive. It should only take us 5 or 10 minutes at the most if we talk about all the questions. If anyone wants to stick around and do this quiz, just a few notes about how this works. So this is at Poll Everywhere, and the link for this quiz is if you go to pollev.com/Dublin IES 054. It is a kind of competition style quiz. So the winner of the quiz is eligible for a prize. But in order for the winner of the quiz to be eligible for a prize, I need to know who that person is. So if you want to participate in the quiz anonymously, that's fine. But if you want to participate in the quiz for a chance to win a prize, if you put in your first and last name at the time that you sign up. So I'll leave this on screen for just another moment to give everybody a chance to navigate to the quiz. I'll put the link in the chat as well. There you go. So the link's in the chat, so we'll give this a go. Let me switch screens here. And once everyone has had a chance to navigate to the quiz, I'm going to activate the quiz and explain it. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see this now. How well do we know the Spring 22 release? Now, the way this works is we're going to go through it together. I'm going to put a question up in front of you, and then you'll have 15 seconds between questions to respond. After you respond, we'll go through it so you can kind of take a breath, and then we'll go on to the next question. But between each question, once I read the question, you'll have 15 seconds to respond. Okay? All right, let's give this a try. Here's our first question. When does release readiness for Spring 22, when does release readiness live begin? So you have 15 seconds. Choose a date. What do you think? Were you hyper-focused on those early slides? Awesome. Okay. Okay, so almost half of our respondents got it right. February 4th is the start of the Release Readiness Live week. So for those folks, congratulations. And for everyone else, now you'll remember February 4th, Release Readiness Live begins. Oh, can't skip our leaderboard. So there we can see our leaderboard. Everybody's doing quite well. Okay, here's question number 2. Which built-in authenticator, right? Be careful with this one. Which built-in authenticator is not supported as a verification method? So you have 15 seconds. Take your time. Which one of these is not supported? All right, time is up. Let's see how we did. So we were split. 50% of the group said phone ID, which is correct, not a thing. And 50% said Windows Hello, which surprisingly is very much a verification method supported in Spring 22. How did that change our leaderboard? All right, that's changed us a good bit. And Sheila, you've jumped to the top of the list there. Very good. So maybe the toughest question of the few that we're going to have tonight, which Spring 22 feature is in beta? Are you ready? In beta, not GA, not pilot, not a dream, in beta. Okay, 15 seconds, 4 options. Which of these is in beta? All right, how did we do? Oh, awesome. 43% of us got it right. That edit multiple fields, that inline editing for reports where we can now edit multiple columns and rows, still in beta, but really getting there, but still in beta. For those of you who said reactive flow screens, very close, but that's a pilot. That's a pilot. So it's not quite mature enough to be a beta yet. All right. Sheila's still at the top of the list there with Jess. Doing very well, Jess. Next question. When will versions 21 through 30 of the SOAP REST and bulk API be retired? So we're looking for a date here, right? Or a release, I mean. When will versions 21 through 30 be retired? So does anybody remember from our conversation, when will these be retired? All right, let's see how we did. Almost to the end now. Okay, and the majority of us said summer 23, which is right. So we have just over a year, 3 releases. And yeah, very good, very good. A few changes in our leaderboard.
Obviously, Jürgen, I don't count. I'm just playing along for fun.
Obviously, unless you win, then that might change, right?
No.
Okay, I think this is our last question. So which card in the Spring 22 release was added to mobile home? Which card? 15 seconds. All right, so hopefully that was a bit of an easier one for everybody. And it was indeed. Nearly 70% of folks said pinned lists. Very good. All right, let's see our leaderboard. Okay, I think. Oh, I forgot a question. So, which flow type is not supported for Flow Trigger Explorer? So 15 seconds. Which flow type is not supported in the new Flow Trigger Explorer? All right. It wasn't very fair of me to leave a hard one like that to the end. But 46% of people got it right. Of course, multi-flow screens. Screens are not a record-triggered flow type, so they're currently not available in the new visualization tool. Very good. There we go. Awesome. So congratulations to our winner, Eric, and congratulations to everyone. That was really fun. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope that the release review was helpful for you. I'm going to take a quick screen grab of our winners. You'll have to allow me to be in touch with you. It'll take me tonight and tomorrow to follow up with you, but I'll send you on your prizes. I have certification vouchers, so I'll send you on these slips that you have a little verification code that you can use to collect your voucher. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that quiz. With that, that kind of rounds out our evening. For those of you who are still new to the group, and for those of you who keep coming back, If you haven't yet connected with me, you can connect with me on Chatter, LinkedIn, or Twitter. If you'd like to speak at our group about something you're passionate about in the future, please get a hold of me to become a speaker. If you'd like to suggest a topic or something you just want to learn more about, I'm always open. The door is always open. And if you want to share something you learned with us, not to be a speaker for an entire session, but just to share something with us for 5 or 10 minutes, that's always welcome too. Just want to put one last thing on folks' radar before they go off on their day. London's Calling, which is one of the biggest local events in the islands between the UK and Ireland, and is scheduled for June 10th, is still on a call for presenters. So if you like speaking or you're thinking about speaking, this is a great opportunity to submit an idea for a presentation at really a phenomenal event. You can go to londonscalling.net or through Twitter and find information for submitting a potential presentation idea to them. That is open until February 13th, so you still have approximately a month to brainstorm something you want to talk about and submit it as an idea. With that, that's all I have for you this evening. So it was really lovely to have you all here, and I hope you learned something this evening. So take care of yourselves, and if anybody wants to stick around and chat a bit longer, I'll still be here.